Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.
The Network Readiness Index, NRI, is one of the leading global indices on the application and impact of information and communication technology, ICT, in economies around the world. In its latest version of 2023, the NRI report maps the network-based readiness landscape of 134 economies based on their performances in 4 different pillars: technology, people, governance, and impact. Each of these pillars is in itself composed of 3 sub-pillars that have been populated by a total of 58 variables. Georgia ranks 78th out of the 134 economies included in the NRI 2023. Its main strength relates to governance. The greatest scope for improvement, meanwhile, concerns impact. When it comes to sub-pillars, the strongest showings of Georgia relate to individuals, access and content, among others. More could be done, though, to improve the economy's performances in the SDG contribution, economy, and future technologies sub-pillars. GDP per capita trend line shows the expected NRI score given an economy's income level. Georgia is well below the trend line, which suggests that it is underachieving and that one would expect it could raise its network readiness in view of its income level. Georgia is ranked 24th in the group of upper middle income countries. In terms of pillar performance, it has a score higher than the income group average in one of the 4 pillars, people. At the sub-pillar level, it outperforms upper middle income countries in 5 of the 12 sub-pillars: access, content, individuals, trust, and quality of life. Georgia is ranked 39th within Europe. It lags behind its region in each of the 4 pillars. Regarding sub-pillars, it outperforms the average in Europe in one of the 12 sub-pillars, individuals. The indicators where Georgia performs particularly well include internet access in schools, adult literacy rate, and population covered by at least a 3G mobile network. By contrast, the economy's weakest indicators include sustainable cities and communities, e-commerce legislation, and annual investment in telecommunications services. What are some global trends in NRI? Here is our short interview with one of the founders of the index, Rafael Escalona Reynoso. Mr. Reynoso, thank you for being with us and taking our questions. My first question will be about the digital readiness and why is it important to track, in general, digital readiness?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is a very important topic for various reasons. The importance of tracking digital readiness allows an economy and a region to understand a little bit better where they stand when it comes to the adoption and the use of technology, which gives you a little bit of a background of how your infrastructure and the use of that infrastructure and the applications of technology and how all of these things together become one single entity that allows the development of a nation from the perspective of from an economics perspective, and allows for a better projection of growth. So it's an important tool that needs to be measured, to be understood, and to be programmed. So I think this is one of the important elements of innovation and one of the important elements of development in the current era.
How does Index do this job over the years, and why this tracking and this time perspective is important?
Yes, the importance of measuring is that anything that you can't measure, you cannot control. So although the imperfection of any measurement within science is something that we have to take into account, using a tool like an index allows you to have different factors built into one single element, in one single indicator that will give you, let's say, a rough picture of what is the state of technology in this case, of again a region or a particular economy, and it gives you more options to, as I mentioned in the beginning, to measure things and to program them in the future. So this is I think this is how we see the indices working. And what we do with the indices is that these different elements that compose the index itself, the composite indicator, allows us to pinpoint specific areas of good development and areas of opportunity. And I think that is the importance of measuring and developing this type of instruments.
How would you summarize the main trends globally? What does the newest index tell us?
Yes, this is very interesting finding that we see this year. This is something that has been, developing over the several years that we've been doing this research. We find that certain economies in areas like Southeast Asia are doing very well with the use of technology and with the use of some of these new tools. But we also find that they don't perform as well in other areas that have to do with the application and, let's say, the more social aspects of this technology. So this is why, even though they have enormous capacity to be ahead of their curve and in the usage of this technology, we see other economies like those in the West, like the United States, for example, or some of them in Europe, and even in Western Europe, that are developing a little bit better performance as measured by the index because they introduce the social aspects and this use of technology affecting and reflected in society in a more cohesive way. And this gives the this notion that it's not only about technology, but it's also about the usage, and it's also about how that use of technology brings betterment to societies. And this is one of the main findings, and the one that I want to express the most from this year's report.
Yes, you focused on East and West, but do developed and developing countries differ in the quality and in the pace of absorbing these technologies and these trends?
Absolutely. That's another thing that we found, and we found this over the years, that many economies that are using this type of that base their growth also in technology and in digital readiness, we find that not necessarily these economies have to be in the higher tiers of income. So we find that economies in Africa or in Asia Pacific, without removing the big juggernauts like China and Japan, we find that some economies in developing, let's say emerging economies, are becoming more and more aware of the need for these technologies, and they're focusing not only in the aspects of adapting their infrastructure, but also in developing more areas related to governance, to people, and eventually to the impact that these technologies have. And what this eventually creates is that some of these economies stand out as being high performers in technology readiness, as opposed to some other more developed economies that by nature and by, of course, resources become automatically some of the big performers. So we see this contrast between these two areas. Some economies. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sorry to interrupt you, but who is the main driver? Can we talk a little bit about that? Is it a bottom-up process where the main player is, for example, the private sector, its readiness, its quality, human capital, its readiness to absorb this technology, or is it more top-down process where, for example, state, like legal base, like these kinds of factors play the decisive role in development?
That is a great question. In reality, and throughout our experience, it is a mix of things. And also we come to the realization that not every model fits everyone. So it really depends on the economy, it really depends on the background. But it is a role of every player within a particular area. We do notice that when the private sector and the public sector have a certain disconnection, the outcome becomes a little bit more complex, and that obviously can trickle down to results. So it's very important to understand that the linkage between all the productive sectors and the public sector is something that is key for the development of this type of study. I mean, for this type of technologies and the adoption of it. But I cannot really pinpoint a specific actor, but I can pinpoint this fact that each of them have a very specific role, and if any of these is missing, then you can obviously tell that there's this linkage, there's this echelon that's missing from the linkage of this readiness in technology development.
So do you think it makes sense for the countries, especially for the countries where there are other pressing needs, some social needs, to still invest in technologies together with the private sector?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question as well. Yes, I think this is extremely important. It's oftentimes it can get a little confusing to think that investment in technology is a luxury, but it has to be seen on the contrary as a tool that eventually will help the development of all echelons of income within a particular region or a particular economy. The reason why is because from our experience and throughout the history of economics and economic development, technology helps as a tool to increase productivity. So by doing so, investment in this type of technologies, by definition, is something that will be a benefit, will create a benefit for society at any level. It really depends also on the access that the technology has. But if we're talking about technologies like, for example, the ones we've seen from the late 20th century and the beginning of this one, for example, the phone and the internet, those are technologies that eventually are very easy to access, and those technologies have changed substantially the way markets are created and the way that the productivity of a nation or the productivity of a whole region is improved. And this also goes down into the individual. So somebody that knows how to use this technology does not need to be either at a development level or a high income level. Also, your question says, what about the private sector? Of course, the private sector can help doing this as an investment, will eventually help develop this type of opportunities within a particular region. And their role, as mentioned in the previous question, rather the answer, is something that is extremely important to consider when taking into account the importance of investments in new technology and readiness in this kind of
Thank you, Mr. Reynoso, for very interesting answers, and thank you again for your time.
The Checkpoints is presented by pharmaceutical company GM Pharma.